Hey YouTube, this is Trains and Destinations, and in today's video we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at a phone here. I've only used this phone very briefly, but my thoughts can pretty much be summed up already. And the phone in question is this. This is the Moto G Fast. Now, brand new, this phone retails at $200, but many times it's on sale, and when it's on sale, the phone goes for $150. And if you get this through a carrier, sometimes the price can be under $100. So let's go over the design of the Moto G Fast real quick. This phone is a 2020 version of the Moto G. It replaces the Moto G7 Play from last year, which that phone also cost $200 when it came out a year ago. And just to compare, I do happen to own a Moto G Play, G7 Play. So if we put the phones here side by side, now I do have a case on the G7 Play, but you can see very clearly the size difference. You can see that the stylus is a much taller phone. It's a much taller phone, just a little bit wider. In terms of the differences in display, the old G7 Play, it has a 5.7-inch HD display. This has a 6.4-inch HD display. Now, again, it should be noted, both of these are HD displays, so 720p. Obviously, this one's smaller, so you can get a higher PPI, so I think the G7 Play will look a little better than the G Stylus, or sorry, the G Fast, but that's just my observation of it. I do think the G Fast has better colors than the G7 Play, but again, it does look a little blurry, the screen does, because of that low resolution. Now I'll move the G7 Play out of here, and we'll talk more about the G Fast. So this is part of the new Moto G line for 2020, where you have the Fast, then the Power, and then the Stylus. Again, this phone's $150. And do I think it's worth it? I think that if you absolutely don't have more than $150 or $200, then yeah, I would recommend this phone. It does have a lot going for it, like this design, which even though it's all plastic, it looks really nice. I like the white back here. It is a glossy back, but it does hide fingerprints pretty well. And as you can see here, you also have a triple camera setup here. So you have a 16 megapixel main camera, and then you have an 8 megapixel wide angle camera, and a 2 megapixel depth camera, and then your flash. So that's really nice to see on a budget phone. Of course, you got a fingerprint sensor, which is nice. I like that you have this sort of fake chrome around the side of the phone. It almost looks like real chrome, and it does add a nice touch, I think. I do think that for $150, this phone definitely looks quite premium. And I do say $150 because, again, this phone is often on sale for that price. And for $150, I would recommend it. But for the normal price of $200, it's pretty iffy. I think that you can probably find better options out there. But even for $200, this is not bad. And it is fully unlocked, available for use on all major carriers. Now, on the left-hand side of the phone, you have your SIM card tray. On the top, you have a headphone jack, which is different from other Moto G phones, because if you have the Power or the Stylus, like this phone I'm recording on a Stylus, the headphone jack is on the bottom of the phone. So there are a few differences, although all three Moto Gs have the same size display. Although the Power and the Power and the Stylus do have 1080p screens, this is only 720. But let's continue along here. So on the side here, you do have a volume rocker and your textured power button. Not very clicky. The Power and the Stylus do have slightly better feeling buttons, but again, it's not bad. And then on the bottom, you have a downward firing speaker, as well as your USB-C port and microphone. Little microphone input there. Not an input, but, your little microphone, for voice calls and whatnot. And that there is another difference. So in both the Power and the Stylus, you get your downward firing speaker and an earpiece speaker. But on the Moto G Fast, you only get the one speaker at the bottom, which is not too good. Downward firing speakers are pretty mediocre, generally speaking. Now, this one does sound pretty loud and pretty clear, but it only comes out of the bottom, so that is a downside. Whereas the old G7 Play from a year ago, it does also only have one speaker, but that is the earpiece speaker. And while it is a little tinny, the fact that the sound is coming right at you from the front rather than from the bottom does mean that while I think the speaker is a little bit clearer, I think the G7 Play overall is slightly better because the sound is coming directly at you. So like I said, the design though of this phone is pretty nice. Now we'll check out here the fingerprint sensor. Not the fastest, but as you can see, let's try that again. Let me see if I can get both in here. So as you can see, there's a very slight delay, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Now, one downside, though, is the vibration motor. And I noticed this because right now I do own a Moto G stylus. I'm using that phone to record this video. And the G stylus has a great vibration motor. But this vibration motor, it's not that good. It feels like it's like one of those vibration motors that you would find on a cheap phone. The whole phone rattles. You can hear the motor spinning. And you can it's just slow to react. It's not a good vibration motor. And even the G7 Play has a nice solid feeling vibration motor, but this one it doesn't feel that good. It really doesn't. You can see though that the bezels are pretty thin, although a little thick there at the bottom. But again, it's a 720p screen. It doesn't look bad, but definitely you can definitely tell though the lower resolution. But I would say that it's perfectly usable. Now we'll open up the camera real quick, and as you can see, this is one advantage of this phone over my stylus. So my Moto G stylus does not have an ultra-wide camera for taking pictures, whereas this does. It's not a very good-looking ultra-wide camera. It's a little hard to tell, but you can see with the ultra-wide camera, the colors, the colors and stuff look a bit different from the standard camera, and it doesn't look as sharp. So, I would say that these cameras are pretty mediocre, but, again, it'll get the job done. And you do have the various controls here. Typical Motorola stuff. You also got your, typical gestures. In terms of storage, you can see that this phone has a lot of apps on it, including some popular games and some older games. But as you can see, one downside of this phone is that it only has 32 gigs of storage. And with those games, I only have 13 gigs of internal storage left. So that's having popular games. So if you have games on here such as Among Us, Call of Duty, which that alone takes up like 4 gigabytes, you're only going to be left with about 12 gigabytes of internal storage. And mind you, there's no pictures or videos on this phone. This just has all the apps that I would normally use. And so that's probably the biggest downside with this phone. It only has 32 gigs of storage. Unless you need a phone for just calls and texts, you're going to run out of storage very quick. Now you can expand the storage, but having more internal storage is definitely a nice thing. And so this is not a bad phone. It's not bad. You do have that hole punch camera, which is perfectly fine. It's not a bad phone. It's just very average. It's very mediocre. And I think that for the money, this is a decent phone for the money. But if you can spend a little more money, the Moto G Power is a much better phone. The Moto G Stylus is a much better phone than this, because with those phones, you're getting a better 1080p display. You're getting dual front-firing speakers instead of just one speaker. You're getting 2 speakers. You're getting smaller bezels, and better cameras too. At least with the stylus. With the stylus, you're getting an overall better main camera. But this phone is not bad. It's not bad. It'll get the job done, and that's really all I have to say about this phone. So I think that if you can find this on sale for $150 unlocked, or you find a special carrier deal, I think you'll be fine with the Fast. But if you need more than 32 gigs of storage, you're going to be disappointed. And I think you probably would want to look around for another phone and see if you can spend a little more money to get a better phone, such as a better Moto G phone or even a Google Pixel 4a. Those phones are definitely going to be better than this phone. That is, of course, if you can afford more money. If you can't afford the extra money, then the Fast will be a perfectly adequate phone. And I would definitely get this over the current Moto E. However, bringing back the G7 Play, I do have this phone here because Motorola is still selling the G7 Play for $130. So this is $150 on sale. This is $130 on sale too, but that sale pretty much is continuous until Motorola runs out of stock. And so this is just my personal preference, but I would actually take the G7 Play over the G Stylus because, at least for me, this is a smaller phone. It's a more compact phone, so it's easier to hold. The performance of this phone is pretty similar to this phone. Both have 32 gigs of storage. Now, in terms of the RAM, this has 2 gigs of RAM, this has 3 gigs of RAM, but really, you're not going to notice a big difference. And in terms of the performance, this has a Snapdragon 632, this has a Snapdragon 665, shared with all the other current Moto G phones. But again, for daily use, you're not going to notice that much of a difference. So I think, honestly, from a budget perspective, the G7 Play might actually be a better phone. Let me know what you think. So overall, thank you for watching.